A little boy is leading his sister up a mountain path. It was not so easy. And she says, "Why, this isn't a path at all. It's all rocky and bumpy." And the little brother says, "But the bumps are what you climb on." I've read scores of biographies of successful people, and I've yet to find one whose life was free from problems, from difficulties. You would think that their life was all easy, but the most successful people sometimes have the roughest life of anyone around. Looking from a distance, they had it easy. But when you get closer, you discover that the climb to the top was not easy. Their road was rocky and bumpy, but the bumps were what they climbed on when they went to the top. We don't have to go too far in the Bible to discover this great truth. Abraham arrives in the promised land. What does he get? Famine. Problems with his nephew Lot. Bad counsel from his wife, which he followed, and Ishmael, and told to offer his son as a sacrifice, difficult for any father or mother. Many bumps in Abraham's road, but he used them to climb higher. If anybody had a rocky road, it would be Joseph. Pampered by his father. No mother. Hated by his brothers. Sold as a slave. Falsely accused. Imprisoned. Forgotten. Apparently forsaken. Yet the bumps helped him climb higher. Moses, David, Daniel, Paul, all similar experiences. But they all use the bumps to climb to the height of their experience. Now, I don't know what you're going through right now. I'm learning somewhat, and I will learn more. But I want you to know that Patty and I are on this bumpy road too. We're in this thing together. You ever feel like quitting, giving up? You ever entertain the question of, why doesn't God remove the stones? Why doesn't He just remove the bumps? Consider, if God did that, we might not ever get to the top because the ascent would be too slippery and we couldn't climb because the bumps are what we climb on. Psalm 91, verse 1. A psalm of David that deals with this. Psalm 91, verse 1. He that dwelleth in the secret places of the Most High, under the shadow of the Almighty, it says. It's a psalm that magnifies the care that God has over us. There are 11 different kinds of dangers in Psalm 91. War, sickness, snares, terrors by night, arrows by day, and 6 others. We would probably say there are 60 others. Yet God says, I'll protect you from them all. One of the greatest promises in Psalm 91 has to do with stones or rocks or bumps in our path. Psalm 91, get to verses 11 and 12. Where David tells us, beginning in verse 11, for he shall give his angels charge over thee, in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. God doesn't promise to remove the stones from our lives. But he says the angels, you love them, don't you? You love that angel that's with you all the time, everywhere you go? He says the angels bear us up, lift us up to keep us from getting hurt on the stones. Now we respond to rocks in our path. We complain about them. We kick them and we hurt ourselves in kicking them. We try to pick them up to get rid of them, only to discover that they're too heavy and there's so many of them. We stop or we turn back. But we don't have to. We can use the bumps. We can use the rocks that get in our path to climb on. The trouble with most of us is we're accustomed to paved roads and level sidewalks, So when the birds don't sing, when there's no music, when there doesn't seem to be a helping hand, do we quit? Do we turn back? No. We remember that the angels of God, His army, are always there with us, lifting us up. Charlie Brown, the comic character, got tired of losing games. And Lucy, in her condescending manner, tries to console him. She says, Charlie Brown, you learn more from your defeats than from your victories. And Charlie Brown shoots back in his melancholy way, then that makes me the smartest man in the world. If life were a series of defeats, just a continual series of defeats, we would all be discouraged. God in heaven knows how to balance our lives. Sunshine, rain, calm, storm, laughter, tears. In life, there are level places that delight us. There are difficult places that challenge us. And we know that the detour is always rougher than the main road. But the bumps are what we climb on. Psalm 81 sheds light on the rocks in our path and the bumps that we deal with. It is a psalm, Psalm 81, where God encourages His people to be happy. He wishes, this great God in heaven wishes that we would approach things differently than we do. Psalm 81, begin with verse 10, if you will. Verses 10 through 16. It starts out with God speaking. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, he says. Open your mouth and I will fill it. And then God says, but my people would not heed my voice, he says. And Israel would have none of me. So he says, I gave them over to their own stubborn heart, to walk in their own counsels. And then God expresses His emotions and says, oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. I would subdue their enemies. I would turn my hand against their adversaries. And then David inserts, the haters of the Lord would pretend submission to Him, but their fate would endure forever. And then we get to verse 16, where David tells us, God would have fed them also with the finest of wheat and with honey from the rock. And then God says, I would have satisfied you. God promises us honey out of the rocks. We know honey as being the sweetest substance that we know of. Rock representing one of the hardest objects in nature. So we have sweetness coming out of hardness. You and I, we get a honey from a honeycomb or beehive, or from an easy way from a jar. Okay. The Lord is saying something far deeper. He's saying you're going to have hard places in life. You're going to be up against the rocks, but don't get discouraged. I'm going to give you honey out of the rock. Don't you love him? You're going to experience sweetness out of the hard experiences of life. And we have found, and we all know it, that God gives us the sweetest experiences of life out of the rocky situations that we go through. Certainly people in Bible days experienced that. Young Joseph, finally, after a long time, gets honey out of the rock, sweetness out of Egypt, the salvation of his family from famine. Young David in the scripture, a similar experience. Anointed king while still a shepherd boy. Yet, his early life hunted like a common criminal. Lived in caves. If ever a man had a rocky experience and lived amongst the rocks, it would be David. I can picture the enemy saying to him, why don't you give up? God promised you a kingdom. So far, all you've got is rocks and caves. That's all you got to show for it. But David didn't give up. And God gave him honey out of the rock. In fact, many of the Psalms that encourage our hearts were born out of the difficult days of David amongst the rocks and the bumps. That's what James, the brother of our Lord, tries to teach us in the very first verse of his letter to us in James 1:1. He says, my brethren, count it all joy when you encounter various kinds of testings, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Trials are not working against us. They are working for us. Don't run around the rocks. Don't complain of the bumps. Don't stand there and expect God to remove them all. Let's look for the honey that's in the rocks. Paul echoes that in that famous verse of Romans 8:28. All things work together for good. God doesn't require greatness, just faithfulness. Right now, you may be up against a rock and it won't move. The road is all bumps. Please consider this. Stop trying to remove the rocks. Stop looking for smoother ground. Let us stop praying for God's excavation team with TNT to deal with the rocks. There is a sweetness out of hardness when you let the Lord have his way. Have you ever considered the bumpy road, the difficulties that Jesus faced when he lived here? Born into a poor home. Never owned much you could call his own. Born into a despised people, a rejected race, a minority group, under the iron heel of a foreign power. Consider his life. Whenever Jesus tried to do good, somebody would turn it into evil. If he stopped to forgive a sinner, they called him a friend of sinners. If he ate a meal with a friend, they called him a glutton, a drunkard. If he spoke the truth, they called him a liar. If he showed the power of God, the religious leaders would say he was in league with the devil. No matter where he turned or what he did, Jesus faced rocks and hard bumps. But my Jesus, your Jesus, never ran away from the hard places of life. He found honey in the rocks that were sweet to him. Can you come with me? Let's go visit. Watch with me as he stumbles beneath the cross. They forced him to carry what was to be his torture throne. See him. Watch him. It's too rough to go. The road up to Calvary was too rocky. Watch as they took him up to that rocky edifice called Golgotha and nail him to that cross. See with me. The blood and water gushed from his side as he died of a broken heart on that rocky hill. Look as they place his lifeless body in a huge rock that was to be the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. You want to talk of your crosses and mine? They pale compared to his, don't they? Yet today, I'm here to remind you that from Calvary, from that empty tomb, from that rocky hill of torture, from that empty stone tomb, flow the sweet honey of salvation to us all, the honey out of the rock. You and I can face the rocks. We can face the bumps and the hard places, the rough times. And from it, he will give us his honey out of the rocks. Because those bumps and those rocks are but his honey bumps. Oh, there's honey in the rock, my brothers. Yes. There's honey for you sisters too. From the hardness, there's sweetness to discover. Oh, there's honey in the rock for you. They're just honey bumps. Just honey bumps. Yeah, they're just honey bumps.
like